The usual suspects here in the chat, man. Like, share, and subscribe. Like I said, we're on every single day. This is the biggest community of the planet, man. Especially when you combine the chat with CanesInSight.com, 7.4 million posts and counting. If you're not talking Canes on here or on CanesInSight, really both, you're missing out. So like, share, and subscribe to this show, and check out CanesInSight.com, all for free. Those forums are bumping. They've been bumping up all day with recruiting stuff and speculation and Instagram posts and likes, and this person was looking at this post and all kinds of stuff. So CanesInsight.com. Yeah, Pete, for those who don't know, and pull up the tweet, Hayes Fawcett, who's really like a kid, right? How old is he, like 18?
No, he's in his 20s.
Oh, really? Well, he looks like he's 18. Anyways, he does the edits, like those photoshops when everybody commits, and you see the player committing, and there's all those fancy, stadiums and I don't know, jets flying and the kid posing with the coach. I don't really understand the edits, like what's a good edit, what's a bad edit. I'm too old to really understand it. But this guy's apparently the best in the business. Aside
it's
from
just that he has the most followers. That's all it is.
And all
that's all it is. He has the most followers. That's why the kids want to do it through him.
So anyway, what often happens, the reason why he's a relevant guy here, if you're an old man like me trying to understand, is that if you're a top recruit, like Pete said, this guy's a lot of followers. So the top recruits will reach out to him and say, make me an edit committing to X school. And he has a reputation for being pretty quiet about these kind of things, other than these little teaser posts like what you're looking at right here. Famously did one for Jeremiah Smith for Miami at like 2 a.m. the day before he signed with Ohio State, which is, one of those great what ifs in Miami Hurricane history. But he knows a lot. And oftentimes he knows before the coaches, because the players will get the edit ready before they tell the coach. So yesterday, as you could see, there's the Sebastian Nieves, there's the U hand emoji, and ×2, meaning basically that he has 2 edits prepared for Miami Hurricanes commits. That had the group chats going insane, trying to figure out who's where, who's what, who are these names. And to me, I think I have some ideas in mind. I actually don't know for sure the answer. I'm not sure, everybody understands the answer. We have some ideas of who it could be. But like I said, sometimes people are left in the dark. I'll be dropping the bank probably this afternoon, which will give you update news. But as of now, I think it's time for some informed speculation, Pete. I know you've been talking to people as well, so you're up to date source-wise on who these 2 might be. So, let's get into.
Well, I mean, I would speculate that one of them is Cannon Pickett. Right. I think that there was a lot of good buzz coming out of the visit he had this weekend. Obviously didn't commit to Clemson last weekend with their big weekend, and they had the feeling he was coming to Miami. But I think after this weekend, the feeling was that it would happen sooner rather than later. Now, on the other one, I know there's been talk about Brett Kaloje. I wouldn't expect anything to happen there until like after the Georgia trip. Kind of like Cantwell, how Cantwell went through his process that way and went through his visits process, even though Miami felt very good about Cantwell before he went on those trips. So I would look for something similar. I know Breck has a visit after, who is it that he's supposed to go see after Georgia? Is it Tennessee?
Yeah, Breck, yeah. But I think Georgia's really the one.
It's Georgia next weekend. I think that's the one. Yeah. And then Tennessee's lined up the week after that. But I don't expect anything to happen there until after his Georgia visit.
Yeah. So let's take a look here. I want to pull up Cannon Pickett's highlights, because I agree with your assessment, Pete, that'd be the name that jumps out to me as one of these 2. So Cannon Pickett, he's listed 6'5", 300. Maybe he's 6'4", but he's a big guy. I saw him in person, seen him multiple times in person, but seeing him with all the other big offensive line recruits, he's a big boy. You see the athleticism there. He's somebody that plays left tackle in high school, projects as a guard in college, wide chested, barrel chested guy. A lot of times, again, this is why you like to see guys in person, just see how they're built. Sometimes you see guys that look big, but then they got thin shoulders. They're just not that broad, who's going to limit their ability to develop power, to really put muscle on. This guy is extremely broad-chested. He has power already. He's going to get more power as he gets strength, and he's athletic enough to play left tackle to get himself out of bad situations, get to the second level. So to me, I see Canen Pickett as a starting caliber guard for the Miami Hurricanes. You look at the schools that are in the mix, two teams that Miami watches closely. Clemson had him on their big official visit weekend. Florida has him theoretically next week. But Pete, I would agree that of these two, I would be shocked if one of them is not Canen Pickett, just because the ties. His brother is here, Booker Pickett, defensive end. His dad played here. He's visited a million times. He had a great weekend visit here. And again, just all the kind of intel that we have is that Canen Pickett is trending towards Miami, has been for a while, despite Clemson getting some momentum at one point with the crystal ball. I think there's a battle that Miami would win. And when you see the highlights, you just see why this is a valued player. And Miami would take him and Kaloje. I've seen people question whether that would be the case. 100%, they would take both Pickett and Kaloje. One has absolutely nothing to do with the other than they, put them together next to each other and have them, I guess, on both sides of the line as guards, and feel pretty good about it. But I think for sure, Canen Pickett is one of these two names. Pete, you're an offensive line guy. We always talk about your background recruiting guys for the pro level as an agent, trying to find out which HBCU kid or undervalued kid has a chance to go pro. So you've learned a lot about offensive line, talked to a lot of people. You talked to your guy, Titus Howard, starting lineman for the Houston Texans. What's he getting paid right now?
$18 million a year, $20 million a year, that range.
Peter Ari's client there. So when you watch Canen Pickett, what do you see?
Well, a guy who's playing tackle right now at this level, but he has the projection to play inside. I think could potentially play right tackle at the next level, if need be. But as we've talked about before, this is someone who, with the type of body that Miami's recruiting on the offensive line, expect him to play inside. And he understands, based on what I know. I was saying last time that he's, he has everywhere that he's a tackle. I was wondering if he, was aware of, where he would most likely be playing next level. From what I understand, he knows he's a guard. I really like the bend that you're seeing. He's what's he listed at? 6'4". What's his weight? 6'4".
He's definitely over 300. I mean, I saw
three looks like 320 to me, or so. But no, this is a guy that it's not that you're saying he's playing guard because he's not athletic, right? That's not what it is. It's more about just his stature. So no, I think that he's someone who, you see him here getting out in space, but once he gets that real grown man strength in the weight room, he's going to be tough to deal with.
Yeah. So I'm going to pull up a different tab here just to give you an idea of what we're talking about with Canen Pickett. Let's see if you can see it here. This picture got a lot of buzz here. So this is Darion Coleman, quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes. Not the best picture to post if you're worried about people are questioning your size, right? This is not the one to post because you're gonna look pretty small next to these dudes. But as you can see,
bring it full size, D. Bring it full size. Click the photo.
All right, give me 1 second here. Give me 1 second. Let's bring this full size here. There we go. So as you can see, you got Jackson Cantwell, right tackle. You got Joel Irvin, left tackle. You got Koloje at left guard. And you got Pickett at right guard. So to your point about where you're projecting him, I think this picture is pretty telling as far as where he might be leaning when you look at position-wise. I think this is how you want it to look for the Miami Hurricanes. Put Ben Cogden as another potential tackle. You always need swing guys, and who knows which one's going to be the starter, which one's going to be the swing, but he obviously is another name in the mix that I really, really like and has the same kind of height. It's actually taller than both these guys while still being heavy. And then center, a Reese Woodrow or a JJ Sparks. So this line should be nasty, but you got to close with those two guys right there in the middle, Canen Pickett and Breck Koloje. Chris Grotto saying that Canen Pickett has a Miami photo as his Instagram profile picture. Let me pull that up. But again,
I mean, look, I think at this point we all understand Miami's the heavy favorite there. I just think, as we saw, how soon is that going to happen? I think he is one of those two, though.
And look, I would say to me, soon, right? That'd be my projection.
Yeah. And my guess, by the way, I don't think I gave my guess on who the second one is, but my guess would be Devin Jackson at safety.
Really? All right, we'll talk about that one in a second here.
That's not based on any info necessarily, other than I believe remember, we gotta get the audio muted before you share it.
Yeah.
So, what I was gonna say is that just I think that there was all that speculation when he decommitted from Florida, and he felt like maybe it would be too obvious to flip right away when he had decommitted. Obviously, we knew about the relationship he has with Will Harris, who recruited him at Florida, but that would be my guess for the second one.
Yeah, so let's get into that. We'll just wrapping up on Cannon Pickett here. There he goes. Chris said, profile picture for Cannon Pickett is his picture. So we'll see if that one gets done. I tend to think, just timing wise, that's a sooner than later deal, from what I could gather. So we'll see. You could get something sooner than later, I think, on that one. So who's my guess on the next? So here are the candidates, right? So you have Brett Kaloje. Let's start with him, just talking about his process here. So Brett Kaloje is, I guess he's a borderline 3-4 star. I think he's a 4-star on the composite, but maybe 247 has him as a 3-star. 247, I really don't think they're biased to Miami. I know that's not a popular opinion, but I don't think that the national guys are biased against Miami. I just think that they're not doing a great job evaluating lately, and they've done a good job historically. There've been some changes there in the last few years, so I don't know what's happening. But like to have this, that Brett Kaloje as a 3-star lineman, he's a 4-star on the composite, when the schools that he's choosing between are Miami, Ohio State, and Georgia. That doesn't add up. That just doesn't make any sense. And then you watch the film, doesn't make sense at IMG, dominating great competition. You see the size 6'6", 300 plus. I saw him in person. Guy looks like he'd play right away. So I think 247 in general, it's not so much a bias against Miami. I just think they're making bad evals, quite frankly. And the NFL draft reflected that, because they were towards the bottom in terms of accurately projecting players. And they just got to tighten some of these up. I like 247. I'm not a hater at all. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to defend like a guy like Brett Kaloje, I'm sorry, as a high 3-star when the best programs in the country are aggressively recruiting him, and he meets all the physical criteria, and the film backs up the physical. So that one makes no sense to me. Cousin Kane says, "Yo, D, yo, P, good to see you again. Fotsa sent something out Monday evening, X2. Know anything about that?" Yep. Talking about it right now, my friend. So we think Cannon Pickett for the first one. Second one, again, I mentioned Brett Kaloje. So let's pull up here a tweet, which I thought was pretty relevant to the whole Brett Kaloje sweepstakes. This comes from Jackson Cantwell. This came like literally right before we went on air. And Jackson Cantwell has pulled this one up. Says, "It just makes sense, Brett Kaloje." Adding him is responding to a tweet from Kaloje to Cantwell. Cantwell, a right tackle. Kaloje right next to him. And talking to him and his family after the visit, they all talk, they said, Kaloje said Cantwell is the smartest kid he's ever been on a recruiting visit with. He said, "Me and him teaming up on 3 techniques is scary." And he basically said that Cantwell was pressuring him to commit early. I mean, like, commit now, be one of that, times 2. But he said, "My recruiting process is different than yours." Basically saying, like, look, you knew you were going to Miami. You visited Georgia anyways. And then you came back confirming that you wanted to go to Miami. So kind of let me do the same thing was the impression I got. So when you talk about that with the Hayes tweet, it could mean 2 things with respect to Kaloje. Either he's not one of those 2 because he still needs to visit Georgia, kind of my guess. Or potentially he knows going to Miami. He told Hayes, "Hey, fire up the edit and then we'll fire that off after I visit Georgia. So he could be the other one, but I tend to agree with you, Pete, just in terms of the timing. I think it's much more of a Cantwell timeline where he's going to visit Georgia, come back home, think about it, make a decision. And in my opinion, ultimately pick Miami for a ton of reasons. I said on the other show, relationship with guys like Cantwell, the fact that Miami's recruited him the hardest, he's visited a ton, and meeting his family. Again, sometimes the family's fighting Miami. I don't get that sense with Kaloje at all. And I think the opposite would be true, where the family's saying, man, this is a great place to be. They're city people. They understand this, the on-field benefits. They understand the off-field benefits. They like Miami, right? I think the sister said she wanted to go there. And he said in his interview, he looks up to his sister and kind of leans on her for decisions, his older sister. So everything's lined up for Kaloje. And every time you see these tweets with Cantwell and to him, those bonds, player-to-player bonds, carry a lot of weight. I've learned over the years. Some things don't mean as much. Some things mean a lot. And those kind of things mean a lot. So I think he could be one, but timing-wise, it wouldn't be till after his Georgia visit.
The funny thing is that, I've heard something along the lines of, Cantwell obviously trying to push Breck to make his commitment as, someone that we've seen publicly who's trying to push and be that way. And it's kind of like Breck's telling him, man, let me take my visits the way that you took your visits.
That's exactly what it is.
So
it's exactly what it is.
It's a funny dynamic there, but, we had a comment here from Michael Quinones that I had up for a second. He says, I'm thinking Tristan Keys and Lamar Brown, thinking big. That would be that'd be wonderful, my friend, but I don't think that's happening with this reference times two, at least.
Yeah, speak it into existence, man. I love it. You mentioned Devin Jackson. So Devin Jackson,
I'll pull up. I have it queued up here. All this stuff, D. Listen, I've had all this stuff ready to go, man.
I know. I'm trying. I learn a little producing, and then I get too excited. So
here we go. Here's Devin Jackson.
Yeah. So with Devin Jackson, who I think there's a ton of positives going for Miami as far as he's a stud. The guy's a great player to be on your board. 6'2", verified 4'5". I mean, legit size and speed. You see him make plays like that at safety. He's not as much of a projection as some other guys. You can kind of slide him right in. Also plays receiver, so he has that athletic ability to go along with the height, weight, speed stuff. The one we interviewed him after the visit, said all the right things about Miami. Very much focused on Will Harris, who recruited him to Florida, who's now at Miami. That relationship came up a lot. Jalen Waters, who was with him on his visit. Sefner Armwood, not far away from Orlando there. Somebody who had a similar process going to Florida, decommitting when Will Harris left. So a lot of good, kind of honestly, kind of like the DB version of a Kaloje, right? Where Waters is hey, do what I did, basically. It's a great situation for you, just like it's a great situation for me. The thing with Devin Jackson, why I wouldn't put him in this category, is you look at the visit docket. He goes to Oregon this weekend, which, look, I mean, I love Eugene in the summer, I love Oregon in the summer, I should say. Not necessarily. Eugene's kind of a dump, but Oregon in general in the summer is great. But I think really people like to visit that Oregon campus, try the uniforms on, do those kind of things. I don't think he's going to not do that. Then he's got Penn State as well, Nebraska. I believe he might be fitting in a Florida visit, even though he decommitted from there. So those are some trips he's going to want to take. Certainly Penn State and Oregon, given what those guys do on the field. Penn State, one of the best, in my opinion, at evaluating defensive players. You see that in the NFL draft every single year. Just they got freak after freak. I think I'm a big James Franklin guy. I think he's one of the best coaches in college football, have been since he was at Vanderbilt. So those are visits that, you don't just cancel. Like Cannon Pick's got Florida on his docket, but Florida's kind of a joke. I could see him just saying, what am I going to do there? He was on the field when Miami destroyed Florida in the opener last year, and he was kind of clowning the Gators. So I could see him just saying, why even bother? Whereas an Oregon or a Penn State, if you're Devin Jackson, I could see him taking those trips.
Yeah. I mean, look, they've been pushing for this one, I think, for a minute. So with the coming off an official visit, and I think he's had time to kind of think about it too, D. like coming off of his decommitment. So I think that's kind of where like I said, my reasoning for saying he could be the second one here. But as a player, I think we talked about him yesterday as well, or maybe a couple of days ago. Maybe it was a couple of days ago when we were doing the official visit breakdown. But we're both big fans of his game, and you just need to get more athletes like this in the room.
Yeah,
I mean, he's not that far off physically from what you see in an Xavier Lucas body type wise. Obviously, Xavier Lucas is more of a corner, has that real coverage ability. But that's the type of athlete you're looking at here.
And if you're running 4.5 laser as a
high
rising
school
senior in high school, that doesn't mean, like, just for those who don't follow these times, like when you're in a 4.5 laser in high school, it doesn't mean you're running a 4.5 at the combine. A lot of times it means you're running like a 4.3 at the combine. These guys get a lot better at running. Not all, but a lot of times, you see guys that ran 4.7 on lasers running 4.3 at the combine. I think of Sheltrick Redwine, who was a 4.77, ran like a 4.4. They learn how to run, their bodies get stronger. Those laser times typically are unforgiving. And a guy like this doing what he did, this is high end physical tools. So very excited about Devin Jackson. But I wanted to put out a different defensive back. You could pull up his film. That's going to be Tyreek Green from Buford. Another guy with a lot of verified traits. He's not as big as Devin Jackson, who's like 6'2", but I interviewed both those guys along with Sebastian Font at the visit weekend once it ended. And Devin Jackson's definitely bigger. He's taller. But Tyreek Green is not a small safety whatsoever. He's listed at 5'10", 191. I would say probably closer to 5'11", he'll be 5'11", almost 6 foot, 191. Definitely safety size. I see no issues there. He's a guy that runs a 10.8, legitimate speed, played running back, played returner for Buford, which is a big-time program. Not the most Georgia-friendly program, believe it or not, despite Georgia being the local school. And I'm hearing a lot of Miami buzz with him just from people around Georgia. I've heard multiple people who live around that area who are involved in the high school scene talking about, hey, I think this guy is leaning towards the Miami Hurricanes. Miami wants him bad. The guy's got, like I said, great speed, great size, good size, great speed, and great athletic ability. Visited Auburn already, which is always a threat with those kind of Atlanta area players. You don't think of Auburn as like an Atlanta local school, but just distance-wise, it's very, very close. So Auburn is very much a local school for Atlanta kids. So he already visited Auburn before he visited Miami. And I think Miami really is ahead of Auburn coming. We just compare those two for his first two visits. The other two schools, I think, are the main contenders that he has on the docket. Florida State next weekend, or this weekend, June 13th, and then Georgia. But, Georgia has a lot of guys committed at that position, and they're after a lot of guys at that position. So, not saying he's not a take for them or anything like that, but it gets crowded. These guys know who's going where. They're not stupid. You already got Jordan Smith from Warner Robins, top 60 player, I should say, from Houston County High School. Similar, a little bigger than Tyreek Hill, but same position. Justice Fitzpatrick, who's a corner from St. Thomas, the brother of Minkah Fitzpatrick. A lot of people think he's going to be a safety at the next level. He just committed. Keelan Jones from Marietta, Georgia, another safety. So they got a lot of safeties already committed. They're after some other guys. So I'm not sure Georgia's a fit there. Who knows if he even makes it to that visit, which is his last one. And then next week, Florida State. I mean, does anyone really worry about Florida State in a recruiting battle in 2025? I can't think of the last battle that Miami lost to Florida State. I mean, who would it be? Like maybe 2 years ago, like Conrad Hussey, I guess Hakeem Williams, but all those guys didn't even play. I think they're all out the door, or about to be out the door. So this is one I could see accelerating potentially. Again, I'll drop the bank with all the full info from talking to people, but just hearing from just the Georgia side, like the Georgia high school side, multiple people are saying, hey, Bryce Perry, right? People still think he's going to Clemson, but Tyreek Green, the buzz is Miami. And look at him play running back here. This is a big time athlete. The kind of guy we've not had guys like this in the defensive backfield that can score touchdowns.
Chris Grotto says Chauncey Kennan in the mix as well for safety. That'll be a tough one.
Yeah, I don't see that one. That one doesn't feel right to me. Obviously, good player, but that one just doesn't pass a sniff test.